Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, crisis management, leadership, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that I always enjoy talking about, and that is extreme crisis leadership. And I'm going to let my guest today explain what extreme crisis leadership means. I'd like to welcome to the show owner and founder of RCAS, Rob Currie. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alex, for having me here today. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's glad to have you. And just for transparency, so everybody knows, I met Rob on our Brazilians course a little while ago. uh,
That's
Out of
correct.
Australia. Yeah, yep. He was part of the cohort and great team there. So I want to ask you, what is extreme crisis leadership? Where'd that come about?
Well, just back up for 2 seconds, just to give a tiny bit of my background. It's just to understand the lens on how I see things. First off, being owner and founder of a crisis management company, we're in our fifth year right now. I never thought if you told me 6 years ago I'd be sitting here talking about crisis management, I would have bet money against it. How did I get here? I was a career Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer for almost 30 years. Of those 30 years, I spent 4 years with our Canadian Specialist Forces, and I'll go back to touch on that specifically. After I left policing, I ended up working at a large Canadian bank as their chief security officer. Then I was with Four Seasons Hotels for about 18 months running their uh, corporate security program and trying to stand that program up. And then I left and decided to go on my own and start this company. So extreme crisis leadership. I look at near the end of my career in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I ended up doing an incident commander course, and I was absolutely enthralled with being empowered to make the decisions on the day when something bad happens. I was to distill that down. But prior to that, I'd mentioned that I'd spent time with our Canadian military. So from 2006 to 2008, you remember Canada was mired in the war in Afghanistan.
Mhm.
One of our gaps as a government was the ability to do battlefield forensics. We were capturing people that were doing bad things against Canadian soldiers and allied soldiers. Most of them were making roadside bombs, which were extremely devastating. And the ability to collect DNA, to collect technical evidence, and to be able to turn that around and find that next person was a gap for our Canadian government, specifically for our special forces to have the mandate to hunt and track these people down. Coming from the policing background, we were doing this in the criminal world for well over 15 years at this point. And so I was selected because I could, as they said, shoot and do nerd things. Those were their exact words. And so I ended up with our Canadian Special Forces Tier 1 unit to help stand that program up. During my 4 years there, it was I won't even, baptism by fire doesn't cover it. I was a police officer. I had done some tactical training. I was relatively fit for my age. I thought things were going pretty good from a policing perspective. But when they took this Canadian police officer and moved him over there, and that's one of the reasons I'll call it extreme. I'll call it extreme from a policy perspective. It had never been done before. And that, but they're like, we can either get a bunch of contractors to do this, try and teach our own people to do it, but the need is now, it's immediate. And how do we fill this? Obviously, there was a strong relationship between government agencies, and we'd helped out with forensics in Canada before. And then they specifically asked, we'd like to have Rob join the team. And so there I am, stand the program up. But again, to come back to the learnings of having been there on how they plan, how they execute missions, and I would say the attention to detail and especially an obsession with failure. And I say failure, things not going perfect. Because when they're going to capture someone, you have X number of people going to a compound where we know that there's a known bomb maker. We have a responsibility for the other people in that compound to make sure that they're not hurt. But we do need to take that person off the battlefield and turn them over to the Afghan authorities. And after every single mission, even before people take their body armor off, before they look at and check their kit, we had an amphitheater, and we would go in there and we would do a debriefing. Now you and I have seen that. We do this with our own clients, Alex, and some people call it a hot wash after action, but their attention to detail and the level of professionalism. And so 4 years later, I get back to policing. I was doing tactical policing, and I'll fast forward to the shooting on Parliament Hill in 2014, and that was my most extreme crisis leadership moment. regular mourning. As you know, we don't get to decide. The enemy gets a vote, or the bad guy, depending, or the threat actor, if we want to be in more corporate language. That morning, we heard on the radio that we heard member has been shot on Parliament Hill. And I always remember, it still gives me goosebumps to say it. Right away, we opened the command center, and it was full on for about 48 hours until we had fully cleared and dealt with the aftermath of the shooting. And the lessons I drew away from having served those 4 years with our Canadian Special Forces, and then applying that to when I was an incident commander with the police, and then in my different roles that I mentioned earlier, we had different things. For example, at Scotiabank, we had devastating hurricanes, very much like we just saw in Jamaica. At that time, Irma and Maria did not hit Jamaica as badly as it has just been hit. Um, but I look at the other Caribbean islands, Dominica was completely wiped out. So again, I was able to apply some of these extreme leadership, what I'll call tenets or examples, or actually some key characteristics of leaders that they need to espouse if they're going to get through these extreme or high intensity conflicts. Um, if I look at probably the first one for me is time equals options, and that goes right back to the planning. When I got back to from the military and I didn't realize how much I had changed. And that first off, when I got there, I didn't understand what they were saying. I knew it was English, but they have their acronyms and way of talking. So for about 3 months, I had a notebook and I'd write things down and go to my military buddies and go, what does this mean? An O group. And they go, oh, it's an operational meeting. We're just going to talk about operations. I didn't realize how much I changed. I went back and was working with tactical police officers, so our National Division Emergency Response Team that responded to Parliament Hill in 2014. And when I first got there, the first few months, it was great, probably one of the cooler jobs I've ever had in policing. And the guy said, boss, we don't understand what you're saying. You talk funny. And I didn't realize all the language I had inherited and brought back from the military. But to come back to the time equals option thing, we would be planning police operations, and the team or sometimes an individual and a few others would come up with an excellent operational plan. And I go, that is outstanding. I'd like another plan. And they looked at me funny, like, why? You just told us that was a really good plan. Whereas in the military, we might plan 3 or 4 different things. Why? Is when something fails on game day, okay, right away, it's very natural for us just to pivot to the next one. And there's no like, oh my gosh, what do we do? We haven't planned for that. So I know when we're planning for like the G7 summits and that, and when I was on the policing side looking at them, they come up with these contingencies and like, well, what if this happens? And they just never stop planning. We need to get down to doing it. I get it now, and there's a balance to be achieved with it. But the earlier you start planning, okay, it leaves more options for whoever's in charge, whoever's making those critical decisions on game day, those extreme decisions. And the earlier you start planning, what I tend to see occasionally in the corporate world is that sometimes bad things may happen because we'll get the tariffs and how that impacted us with supply chain. Some organizations were kind of hoping that that wouldn't impact them. When we say that hope is not a course of action, it's not a plan, but we see that, and I can see you nodding. So again, the earlier you start planning for that, even if they don't happen, and I think that was the other culture piece for police officers. Well, why would we come up with plans and never execute them? And so it took a while, and I'll get down to my next point on that. I found it gently frustrating in the beginning, but I also remember when I got to the unit at the time, how frustrated I was trying to understand why they did all these things. So there's a bit of patience there, and culture, you can't just write a statement and put it on your website and say that Alex, that's now our culture here at our CAS or whatever organization. And culture takes time. And it took about 18 months, I would say, until it solidified. Now, when we started that predated 2014. And so I had some time to make those changes. I'd love to tell you I knew that what was going to happen on Parliament. Actually, if we did, I guess we would have arrested the person before they did anything, the terrible things that they did that day. But the thing is, we don't get to pick often when that day is, but we do get to pick our response. And we had multiple responses. So again, the culture had changed. The team was used to making them. And the other thing that happened that with extreme price management is trusting your front end or the pointy end of the stick, the people on the front line, and making sure that they've been empowered during day-to-day operations. So my example from 2014, I told you it was a regular day. I'm doing paperwork. The team is going out to the range to do a public relations shoot with our public relations team. And so they're off and they're driving down the highway. So just for context for Ottawa, we're in the east where our command center was and our operations were, and the range is out in the west. The center, just about halfway between those two main points there is where you get off of our main highway in Ottawa and you enter head towards Parliament. They heard the same thing on the radio that I had. They did not call back and ask for permission. They pulled over to the road, the side of the road, started kitting up and preparing, and they went directly to Parliament Hill and executed plans that we'd put in place years before. And so we had snipers topside within, I think it was 16 and a half, 17 minutes. That's never been seen before. And do we want to call it an international terrorist, but something that did hit the international press. And I don't want to compare calamities because there's no upside to doing that. And this isn't a situation of bragging at all. I say it with a huge dose of humility, but that investment early on let those tactical officers understand that they were empowered to immediately respond. Now they called and said, listen, we're going into Parliament. We are looking for their aggressor. He has entered Parliament and we are going to find that person. And I'm like, boy, that's not a typical response always with, I won't say Canadian policing, but it was something a little bit different that they would take that much initiative without coming back and checking with the commander first. And that was purposeful. So the culture had been changed, and we call it mission command, pushing that a level of authority right out to the edge because they have to make big boy and big girl decisions immediately. And I can't be the slow part back on the radio going, well, what if? Did you think of this and that? So that was a positive dividend of that day. Go ahead, Alex.
But I was just thinking with the time and options and the multiple plans that you talked about that you got asked to do. I guess that also helps with if you're halfway through the first plan and something's falling off the rails, it gives you the ability to pivot and adapt to the situation quicker because you've thought of other ways of doing things,
And
right?
there's that, Alex, and there's also a personal detachment. I had folks, listen, I had this happen to me when I was at the unit preparing for something. It's not important what, and I came back and I got destroyed when I presented it. I think I had 27 slides and 26 were that's wrong, that's wrong. I'll leave the expletives out, but it was like, and I was like ready to suck my thumb. And I went and saw one of my military buddies who was trying to guide me through this transition, and he goes, "It's not your plan." I go, no, no, I was told I was in charge. Yes, you've been empowered to develop that plan. It's not yours. You're developing it on behalf of the commander. That is his plan.
Mm.
And it helped me realize that it wasn't about being my plan, but the minute you take my and any personal attachment away from, I'm still proud. You can be proud of your work, proud of, and I always remember the commander telling me that after. And I remember asking over, we were just sitting in a very so, and I said, "What? Why is this?" And he said, again, it's not about you, it's about the mission. And the minute you can detach yourself personally, and I got into this whole piece of, well, what if you don't execute one of these two plans? He goes, our job is to be relevant and provide options to government. And the same thing in Afghanistan. We were part of a larger coalition, and it is our role to present plans and options to deal with certain situations. Someone will make that decision. Whether your plan is executed or not may happen for a variety of reasons. Political effect, there may be other imperatives. Operationally, it's not the right time to execute. So I hoisted that aboard and brought that back to the rest of my policing career, which was 4 years post leaving the military, and then even at the corporate world as well. But I went through that same, I'll say, culture shock when I started in talking about, well, no, what would you do to some of my more subordinate staff? Now, but you're the boss. You decide. I said, no, you're the expert in this area. You tell me what you think is what the risks are that I have to manage here at my level, and I will let you know whether I'm comfortable actually in that our plan, but it is our plan on behalf of the organization. And again, it was that whole emotional detachment. It's not your plan, and your job is to provide relevant options up the chain. And the second part is the time equals options. The more plans we have, the better we're ready to deal with this. You meant just your question earlier. One of the courses we did with the tactical officers, the National Division ERT team that I was working with, it was to prepare to work in what we call hostile environments, so non-permissive environments. An example, we ran an operation in Somalia, and that we were supposed to take a minister in to do a visit. Obviously, it's a failed state, very austere. So we provided the team quite a bit of training, and we would consistently in the training, and I'd been through this from a military experience, you have a timeline. Alex, you've got 2 hours, you've got to get this done. You've already been up for a whole night, so you're tired and cranky, and you probably haven't eaten enough. And you're just about to execute the plan, and you've been working that we've been putting tons of pressure on you, and you're the leader. Let's say you're the sergeant of the team, and we pull that the last second, go, yeah, that's changed. You now have to change your plan. You're going to assault that area by water, not by land.
Hmm.
But that conditioning, and the few times it happens, it's like, could you not give clear direction from the top? And that can happen. There's sometimes organizations can be whimsical, but from a military and just from, I think from anyone's perspective, things happen and our plans change, and our ability to pivot is the key.
Yeah, that's our industry. That's the
That that
resilience and business
That's
continuity
what
disaster
that's what we do.
response. That's our industry right there.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking with Rob Currie today, and we will be right back.